Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. I have in front of me The Will to Believe by one William James. I was accused of grossly misreading this, so let us put it on record, shall we? I'm going to quote directly from the article. It's 9 pages long. We're not going to do all of it, but we'll do a fair bit of it, and like I say, we'll have it on record. Starting the last 2 sentences or so of the first paragraph. He says some stuff, because he's giving this paper a speech, and some stuff that we're not interested in. He says, tonight he's going to read something like a sermon on justification by faith. I mean, an essay in justification of faith, a defense of our right to adopt a believing attitude in religious matters. So we have a right to adopt a believing attitude, in spite of the fact that our merely logical intellect may not have been coerced. He has a special meaning with the word coerce there, doesn't he? The Will to Believe, accordingly, is the title of my paper. I have long defended to my own students the lawfulness of voluntarily adopted faith, but as soon as they have got well imbued with the logical spirit, they have as a rule refused to admit my contention to be lawful philosophically, even though in point of fact they were personally, all the time, chock full of some faith or other themselves. Now that's an assertion. So where does that idea come from? Probably, I would say, Kant, and Kant probably got it from Hume. So I guess we can stick it right to Hume, but more likely James got it from Kant, I would think, that everybody has faith in something, that it's impossible for your mind to work without having faith in something. That's just an assertion, and it's a destruction of the concept of what faith is. If we actually said, okay, faith is such and such that every person on the planet has faith in something all the time, no matter what they do, then we're going to have to come up with a new concept for faith, which is believing something even though there's no evidence for it. So this is destruction of ideas by non-definition. Continuing with the tripe, I am all the while, however, so profoundly convinced that my own position is correct, that your invitation has seemed to me a good occasion to make my statements more clear. Perhaps your minds will be more open than those with which I have hitherto had to deal. I will be as little technical as I can, though I must begin by setting up some technical distinctions that will help us in the end. Alright, let's dive in. Let us give the name of hypothesis to anything that may be proposed to our belief. Semicolon. And just as the electricians speak of live and dead wires, let us speak of any hypothesis as either live or dead. So that's just a metaphor. He's just going to say that a hypothesis will either have electricity in it or it doesn't. A live hypothesis is one which appeals as a real possibility to him to whom it is proposed. If I ask you to believe in the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I, the notion makes no electrical connection with your nature. It refuses to scintillate with any credibility at all. As a hypothesis, it is completely dead. To an Arab, however, even if he be not one of Mahdi's followers, the hypothesis is among the mind's possibilities. It is alive. So it looks to me like if the hypothesis is alive for somebody, and that hypothesis is patently false, then we could label that person to be, we could say they are credulous, or a cretin. This shows that, he would not agree with it. This shows that deadness and liveness in a hypothesis are not intrinsic properties, but relations to the individual thinker. So he says deadness and liveness, whether the person's willing to give the theory credit or not, whether the person's willing to accept the hypothesis is possible, whether the person's willing to entertain it. He says that's not inherent in the hypothesis itself, it's in the person's mind who's hearing this idea, hearing this hypothesis. That's exactly true. But let us remember that the falsehood of the proposition, or the truthfulness of the proposition or the hypothesis, is in reality. It's couched in reality. So the person's delusions to the contrary notwithstanding, if the hypothesis is objectively not true in reality, let us continue with the tripe. This shows that the deadness and aliveness in a hypothesis are not intrinsic, but relative to the individual, relations to the individual thinker. They are measured by his willingness to act. The maximum of liveness in an hypothesis means willingness to act irrevocably. Practically, that means belief, but there is some believing tendency wherever there is a willingness to act at all. Bit of an assertion there. He's just saying, he's not giving us any reason to believe with or agree that. He's just putting down his terms. He's saying this is what he's saying. Next, let us call the decision between two hypotheses an option. Options may be of several kinds. They may be 1, living or dead, 2, forced or avoidable, 3, momentous or trivial. And for our purpose, we may call an option a genuine option when it is of the forced, living, momentous kind. Then he goes over the 3 things. 1. A living option is one in which both hypotheses are live ones. If I say to you, be a theosophist or be a Mohammedan, it is probably a dead option, because for you neither hypothesis is likely to be alive. We already get that analysis. Let's skip the next few sentences there and go to number 2. Next, if I say to you, choose between going out with your umbrella or without it, I do not offer you a genuine option, for it is not forced. You can easily avoid it by not going out at all. Similarly, if I say either love me or hate me, either call my theory true or call it false, your option is avoidable. You may remain indifferent to me, neither loving nor hating, and you may decline to offer any judgment as to my theory. But if I say either accept this truth or go without it, I put you on a forced option, for there is no standing place outside the alternative. Every dilemma based on a complete logical disjunction with no possibility of not choosing is an option of this forced kind. Going to number 3. Finally, if I were Dr. Nansen, who's that, and proposed to you to join my North Pole expedition, your option would be momentous, for this would probably be your only similar opportunity, and your choice now would either exclude you from the North Pole, sort of immortality altogether, or put at least the chance of it into your hands. So you'll either be totally out of it, or you'll be one of the immortals. He who refuses to embrace a unique opportunity loses the prize as surely as if he had tried and failed. Per contra, the option is trivial when the opportunity is not unique, when the stake is insignificant, or when the decision is irreversible if it later proves unwise. Such trivial options abound in the scientific life. A chemist finds an hypothesis live enough to spend a year in its verification. He believes it to that extent. Does he? Now that's an assertion. To take a hypothesis you don't believe and you aren't sure of, and test it for a year. William James asserts that you believe it to that extent. What? But if his experiments prove inconclusive either way, he is quit for his loss of time, no vital harm being done. The thesis I defend is, briefly stated, this. And it's not briefly stated. It's a small paragraph. Here is his thesis for this essay. Our passional nature, not only lawfully may but must decide an option between propositions, whenever it is a genuine option that cannot by its nature be decided on intellectual grounds. For to say under such circumstances, do not decide but leave the question open, is itself a passional decision. If you say do not decide but leave the question open, that is itself a passional decision, just like deciding, and is attended with the same risk of losing the truth. The thesis thus abstractly expressed will, I trust, soon become quite clear.